You meant the back row, Nolan?
Yeah.
Thank y'all for coming to the Lunch and Learn. We have a guest speaker today, Ms. Cheryl Williams, and she's going to share some information with you about mental illnesses. And if you will give her your attention, and if your cell phone is on silent, if you will silence it, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for attending today's Lunch and Learn. And thank you for being here with the topic mental illness. A lot of times people don't attend because of the stigma that's attached to mental illness and mental health diagnoses. A lot of times they won't attend because somebody might question why they're going. Do you have a mental illness? Is that why you're attending? And so it takes courage to come to a conference today and to learn more about mental health and mental illnesses, because that's the first step in helping us to break the stigma. And raise your hand if you want a mental illness. Raise your hand if you want a mental illness. And nobody raises their hand. Every time I ask that question, people look at me like, I don't want a mental illness. Well, neither did my family, and specifically, neither did my son. And mental illness doesn't see cultural boundaries, racial boundaries, socioeconomic boundaries. Mental illness is here, and people don't talk about it. So when my family was impacted, specifically my son was impacted with mental illness and challenged with mental illness, just when I needed the resources the most is I couldn't find any resources. That's when I found out that the resources were the least with mental health. And as a former educator, I taught 6th grade for 11 years at Tripp Middle School in Vidalia. I went back and got a master's in school counseling, so I finished up my career in school counseling at Vidalia High School. And at the high school level is also where we saw a lot of families, a lot of parents and grandparents would come into my office and their child just spent a week in a psychiatric hospital and they didn't know what to do. So when my son, I also shared with them the experience that my son was also in and out of a psychiatric hospital. Sometimes every 4 months he would have a hospitalization because of noncompliance with the medication. And so I know what that's like. And so we would have a dialogue. And again, having a dialogue about it helps with the stigma. So a little bit about my son. My son was, I have two sons. I have a 32-year-old, and then my son Heath is actually Brandon. He just turned 33, and Heath is 31. And he was a stellar student. Got a full academic scholarship to play basketball to Middle Georgia College. He was in the engineering program. And after 2 years on the dean's list to play basketball, he finished up his 2 years. He was headed to Georgia Southern. And he met this young lady, and they started dating. And he started partying a little bit, but I didn't think it was anything kind of inappropriate, for a college student. And then he started not going to classes, and then he said, Mom, I'm joining the military. I want to be a Marine. And I said, okay, you always support your kids. And so I said, okay, I wish you wouldn't, but that's what you want to do. So he did. And he spent probably a year in training, and his MOS was communication. He was in communications as a radio operator, and he spent 8 months in Iraq. Traveling with his sniper platoon, and that was the trigger to his illness. And a lot of folks ask me if he hadn't have gone to Iraq, would he still have had received that diagnosis? And my answer to that is I don't know. What I do know is people that I've talked about or talked with, their loved one, usually in their 20s, just when your life is starting to take off, that's when mental illness will strike young people, and not all the time, but a lot of the times, or have a major traumatic event in their life. I run a parent support, or not a parent support, but a family support group, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And we meet 2 times a month, and the people that come to the group, their sons, their daughters, their wives, their husbands, their mothers, their fathers. There was a major traumatic event. Either they had a sexual abuse when they were younger, or either when they were older, they had a terrible divorce, or they had a tragic death in their family. But that was the event that led to the illness. So my son's illness, Iraq was the trigger to his illness. And when he got back from Iraq, he had like a month off, and then he was preparing for operations in the field to go out on a ship in September, and that's when he had his first break as a field operator. And he spent the next 9 months in a psychiatric hospital at Camp Lejeune. So after the summer of 2009 is when he came home, and he was ours. And he was still trying to find his way. And we had received the diagnosis from Camp Lejeune, and it was schizophrenia with PTSD complications. And if you know anybody with schizophrenia, it's a total break from reality. And schizophrenia is a thought disorder. So his thinking, a lot of times, especially when he's in psychosis, he's on some medication, he thinks things that I never thought he'd think before. But again, that's mental illness is a brain-based illness, just like diabetes is a pancreas-based illness, and heart disease and cardiovascular disease is a heart-based illness. Mental illness is brain-based illness. So after he was medically discharged, he came home, and again with PTSD complications, not being around people, and again he's a combat vet, and he was going to go to Fort Hood to down this program called Veterans to Riggers. So he wanted to work on the oil rig, and they were training veterans at Fort Hood in Texas. So he went out there, and remember that's when they had the shooting. And they had the shooting at Fort Hood. And that was the first break that we actually saw. So it took us a while to get him home from Texas to Atlanta. We met him in Atlanta. And that's when he had his first break, where we saw his first break from reality. And it is scary. You don't know what to do. It's a person and it's behaviors that I've never seen from my son, and never even dreamed in 1,000 million gazillion years that it would impact our family. So then he went to Peachford, and then he received the diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder with PTSD complications. And schizoaffective disorder, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like schizophrenia, the break from reality, and then the thought disorder combined with bipolar, extreme manic and extreme depressed states. So when we finally got back home from Peachford, his behavior was still bizarre. We still didn't know what to do. And by then, no resources, but I knew we had to do something. And so somebody brought me this article in Swainsboro News. They had a NAMI class available. And that NAMI is an acronym that stands for National Alliance on Mental Illness. It was a family class, and it's a peer-to-peer education program. So my husband and I drove 12 weeks to this free class, and it's for families who are dealing with a loved one with a mental illness. And we learned about the mental illness, and it was also like empathy training. It helped us learn how to communicate with our son, and it also helped my husband and I realize that it's what we've been married. We've been married 35 years, and so this was, we married like over 30 years when all this was happening, almost 30 years, and we were arguing like crazy. We didn't know what to do. I was like, we need to do this, we need to do this. But thank goodness we found NAMI, because NAMI helped us navigate. There is no roadmap with mental illness. There's no roadmap whatsoever. When you have a physical illness, there's basically a roadmap. You have a prescriptive plan that you follow. NAMI was our roadmap to help us, to help our son. So then I went to get trained for this family program, and this is available in Vidalia. And I'm getting ready to, I just met a lady not too long ago from Dublin, and I'm going to drive to Dublin to teach this class because this is a critical piece to the roadmap. So I've got some pamphlets up here. I just finished a class, feminine family class, but if you're interested, grab one of these pamphlets and then my contact information and give me a call. Then after you finish a 12-week course, I went to get trained, taught our first class, and it's like you make such connections with people that understand what you're talking about because there's no substitute for shared experiences. And to know that you're not alone and you're not walking this journey alone, it's invaluable. So then I started a support group, my husband and I did. So we have a family support group, and then we have mothers, husbands, wives, sisters, siblings of loved ones who are all learning to live with somebody with a mental illness because it's a challenge. And this is where we take care of ourselves because I have learned and we all have learned that you've got to take care of yourself because when your loved one goes into crisis, then you've got to be able to, and healthy enough to be able to help them when they go into crisis. So this is also available in Vidalia. Family Support Group meets twice a month at the Dixon Building, and there's some information up here if you would want some more information about when we meet and stuff. Also, Basics is offered in Vidalia. I went to get trained. This is for school-aged parents of school-aged children. And being a school counselor, and so many parents, especially at the high school, would come to me after their child was, or their grandchild was spent a week or so in psychiatric hospital. I knew that they also needed training as well. So NAMI has this available. I went to get trained on this. The Homefront program, my husband and I just got trained for the Homefront program. This is a program that is also available. It's to strengthen military families, and this is a 6-week free program. All these programs are free. I volunteer with NAMI. We're sponsored by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, and so everything is free. All of the programs are free. They're offered free. My training that I go to is free. I can't say enough good things about NAMI. Also, in this area, don't know if you guys are aware of CIT trained officers. Anybody ever heard of the CIT trained officer? Have you? Good. Well, if you haven't, please make a note somewhere that this is available in your area. We just trained a group of, in fact, it was in Swainsboro. They just had a CIT training in February. And then in November, we had a CIT training in Vidalia. And CIT means, it's an acronym for Crisis Intervention Team Training. And they will even if you're on campus and one of your friends or somebody you notice their behavior is just a little bit different, you can call a CIT trained officer. And if you ask for a CIT trained officer, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get an officer who's been through a week-long training, and I've been through the training, and I'm a NAMI support person for the training. Excuse me. And they are. It's pretty intense, but they learn how to de-escalate. When someone's in not only a mental health psychotic state, but if they're in a drug psychotic state, drug-induced psychotic state, or an alcohol-induced psychotic state, or even a trauma-induced psychotic state, they are trained to de-escalate that person so they can get them some help. And I've had to call CIT trained officers several times to my house. And I live in Montgomery County, and we currently do not have any CIT trained officers. Lieutenant O'Connor he had responded, came to my house a couple times, and he was committed to have CIT trained officers, but then he tragically was killed in a car wreck. And so, remember that? Yeah, that was sad. He was all about CIT. But Toombs County, Sheriff Kite in Toombs County has pledged to have 100% of his officers CIT trained. So James County comes across county lines and they come to my house. And it's really, I've learned so much from the CIT trained officers, because when my son's in crisis, no longer am I the authority figure, but when the police officer walks up, then they become the authority figure. And I know now that I just kind of step back and let them do what they need to do, but they treat him with dignity and respect. And they give him choices, because they knew that he was going to have to go for an evaluation at the hospital. And they gave him a choice. Do you want to go in this car, or do you want to go in this car? And they gave him choices. And it was powerful to see. But please always ask for a CIT trained officer if you have a situation when you know you need somebody to respond. Also in your area, I hope that everybody grab one of these cards, or you can grab more. This is it's called GCAL, Georgia Crisis and Access Line. And this is for people with, again, developmental disabilities, mental health, drug, or alcohol. You can call this number, and these guys are also funded by the Department of Behavioral and Mental Health, the Department of Behavioral and Developmental Disabilities, and they will come to your house. And I've used this number before too, and they just talked to my son, because they try to avoid a hospitalization. They talked him into taking his medication, so we avoided a hospitalization. It's just somebody else to come in. If they're licensed practicing counselors or they're licensed social workers. But if you look on the back of the card, it tells you if you know somebody, if you or somebody you know threatens to or talks about hurting or killing themselves, feels hopeless, feels rage or uncontrolled anger, feels trapped like there is no way out, engages in reckless behavior, increases alcohol or drug use, withdraws from friends and family, feels anxious, agitated, or unable to sleep, encounters dramatic mood changes and sees no reason to live, then call this number, and there's somebody there to talk to you about the person that you're concerned about. Or if you're the one that's feeling these, they will talk to you. They're great. They're super great. Anybody ever heard of these folks? Pass the word. They're based out of Dublin. They were just made available to our area just 2 years ago, and so try to get the word out. Any questions so far? I know I'm speaking fast. I told you I got about 30 minutes, and I know you guys are. Any questions? Okay. So stigma. I want to talk about that for a minute. Currently, I think about when I first was speaking at speaking engagements, and I was still counselor at the high school, and a lot of my friends, because they knew I was talking about mental health, and they knew that I was talking about, in particular, my son and my family, given the family perspective, and they said, Cheryl, everybody's going to know then that he has the illness. Everybody's going to know. I'm like, well, guess what? They already know something's just not right, because his behavior was different. His dress is different. He's different now. They already knew. So I talked to my son about it. Thank goodness my son allows me to be transparent about his illness. Because even in our family support group, probably not, if not all, most family members don't even tell their loved ones they're coming to a family support group, because they're afraid of what their loved one would say. And then their loved one, oh, don't you talk about me, don't you talk about my illness. That's how much stigma is attached. We had somebody talking in the support group the other day, and one of our group members, their loved one, just got home from Georgia Regional Hospital. She was court-ordered, and that's another whole situation, because not only do we educate, not only does NAMI advocate, but then we also support. But the advocate piece is that we advocate for those with mental health issues. We spend time at the Capitol. I've learned to make phone calls to advocate for people with this challenge. But kind of lost my thought. Oh. Stigma, that's right. So anyway, so this lady in the group, she works with the local gallery there in Vidalia. And so she was going to give this lady who just got smart, this woman was really super bright, very gifted, writes grants and stuff, or did before her illness struck her. And so she called the lady that just got a Georgia Regional and said, hey, did you write some grants? Well, the folks called the lady in our group and said, do you know about this person? Do you know that she was in the hospital? And I was so proud of the friend in my group because she said, if so-and-so had cancer, would you be telling me this? And then she said, of course, I hush, silence. That helps to erase stigma. I had a friend the other day talk about the guy across the street. He is mental or something. I'm like, excuse me. I have a son that has a mental health diagnosis. So please be careful how you use that word. Oh, Cheryl, I'm sorry. But it's mentioned on this piece of paper right here. Keep calm and stop the stigma. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you. Shout out. But this is so true. The suffering you see is the iceberg effect. The suffering you see, and then the suffering that's never talked about. And this is what we talked about. We now have a suicide coalition that we started. One of our group members, her husband committed suicide in August. And it rocked our group because it's home. Because I know that with my son being a vet, that at least 22 vets a day are committing suicide. And overall in the United States, the suicide rates were kind of leveled out, and it's an increase until 2009. And that's the year that my son was released from the military, and that's the year that all the guys were coming back and girls were coming back from Iraq. So now the suicide rate is starting to increase. But Montgomery County has a really high rate of suicide. So we started the Suicide Coalition, and we had our first Survivors of Suicide meeting. So that's also available in Vidalia, and I've got some contact information stuff if you'd like that as well, if you are a survivor of suicide. But the iceberg, you don't ever know what's going on underneath. And if you're a loved one living with somebody with a mental illness, or you're living with a mental illness, the stress of it alone could be that one last drop of water that puts you over the edge. My son, he gets really suicidal. I'm not afraid to ask him questions. Are you having thoughts? Do you have a plan? I'm not afraid to ask that. Do you have a plan? And when he says yes, yeah. And so he's battling because suicide rates are also high among those who are living with a mental health diagnosis. So my son's kind of got a double whammy. And so that's our mission also, is to educate people and don't be afraid to ask. Yes, ma'am.
Does he have a problem with answering the question? Feel irritated with you?
Sometimes it depends on what kind of mood he's in. Did I also mention, that makes me remember this, I don't think I mentioned that he has a dual diagnosis. Alcohol is his drug of choice. So I can tell when he's been drinking. So when he's been drinking, he really doesn't like me to answer those questions because alcohol is a depressant. And so, I mean, that's a terrible drug, but it could be worse, I reckon. But anyway, but that's not very uncommon to have a dual diagnosis when you're talking about mental illness. So on this piece of paper, keep calm and stop the stigma of mental illness. Talk openly about mental health, which is what we're doing today. So I encourage you guys to leave this lunch and learn and tell somebody what you learned or what we spoke about, because that's where the stigma, or helping to stop the stigma, starts, which is talking openly about mental health. Educate yourself and others about mental health. Challenging people respectfully when they are perpetrating stereotypes and misconceptions, speak up and educate them, which is what you guys are doing here today, which is, I just so appreciate you being here. Being conscious of your language. Saying someone is retarded or even mention the N-word is politically incorrect, but there is still it's still fine to throw around words like crazy, psycho, and lunatic. So I'm really sensitive to that, and so I'm not afraid to say, hey, because it's not just my son. 1 in 4 people 1 in 4 people have some kind of mental health diagnosis. So yeah, you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So if you see a statistic that says 1 in 5, because sometimes you'll see a statistic that says 1 in 5, but 1 in 4 counts for those that are undiagnosed. If you see 1 in 5 people, then they're not accounting for those people, because some folks live their whole life and never receive a diagnosis. In fact, there's this one gentleman that I met, and he has schizophrenia, and he's also has a dual diagnosis, and meth was his drug of choice. But he's been clean and sober and taking his meds. And he said that when he learned that, hey, it's not me. There's a reason why I'm acting this way. This isn't me, it's my brain. And then he educated himself. Then it just made sense. Then he could work on his wellness and recovery. So that gentleman now he does speaking engagements all across the state, all across the nation at NAMI conferences, because there is wellness and recovery in mental health. There's wellness and recovery. My son's getting there. He's not there yet, but I don't ever give up hope, because I know that one day he will. Also, show empathy and compassion for those who live with a mental illness, because they didn't ask for it. They didn't raise their hand for it. They can't. My son didn't ask for it. He didn't say, "Oh, sure, I'll be the one out of the 4 to have schizophrenia, PTSD." Stop the criminalization of those who live with mental illness. Professionals and families together need to talk to neighborhoods and groups and law enforcement. My son has been involved and has had trouble with the law when he's been off his meds and he's drinking, and he needed to be locked up. But again, he was in psychosis, and he was very agitated. Again, he's a combat vet. He charged one of the law enforcement officers. He was tased. He fell down, busted his head. They had to transport him to the Meadows Emergency Center. He thought that the doctor was implanting a chip in his head when he went to sew him up. And so he was in handcuffs, and he did like this, because again, when my son goes into psychosis, he goes into the military mode. So he was protecting himself, and he thought that the doctor was implanting a chip in his head, and so he assaulted the doctor, and then just all heck broke loose. And then they called me, and went down there and said, he takes this medication. The VA is not very politically correct, and because they have the medication and then have what it's for. And I'm like, this is his diagnosis, and this is the medication he needs. I shot a hound on that man, but I said, did you give it to him? I'm sorry, ma'am, HIPAA laws, we can't tell you what we gave him, and they can't. So anyway, but House Bill 705 didn't pass, which is where NAMI is an advocate for that bill, and it's a family initiative. It's a family that helps families, because if that House bill had been passed, then they wouldn't be able to tell me, because I'm my son's, thank goodness he allows me to be part of his treatment program too. So anyway, so NAMI advocates for that. Didn't make it out of committee this year, but we're going to go still advocate for it. Push back against the way people who live with mental illnesses are portrayed in the media. Oh my gosh, it's not good at all. Ryan Reynolds made a movie, and he had schizophrenia, and this was like, because I emailed about 4 people. I said, come on, dude, are you serious? The people that are living with that. But he was thinking that this, and anyway. But media is not good. See the person, not the illness. That's what NAMI helped me and my husband do. See my son, not the illness, and my son's working on that. And those who live with mental illness, it's hard for them not to see the illness first, but you see the person first, and then advocate for mental health reform, which is what NAMI does. But anyway, so that's a family perspective of mental health. And again, I challenge you guys to go out today and at least share that with somebody. I've got my contact information up here at the front. If you guys ever want to call, I help folks in crisis, because sometimes that amygdala in the brain, especially when you're in crisis, you just kind of freeze, and And so other NAMI folks around the state, I've got friends, okay, Cheryl, do this, do this. But anyway, but currently my son he's been compliant with his medication. His last hospitalization was in July. And so we try to avoid hospitalization. He lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee now. He's been there for almost a year. And I don't work, so I can go back and forth. And he still allows me to go to the doctor with him. But we have the family support group and the family support because families need support and their loved ones need support. And we're here to support. And any questions or comments? Ma'am?
Does he always have an episode when he's drinking? Does alcohol just trigger his episode, or can he just have one anytime? Just out of curiosity.
That's a good question. She asked when does he have an episode, and we call it episodes, or he's in crisis, or you hear family members call it different things. But sometimes it depends on if he's been off his meds. If he's been off his meds and then drinking, that's a bad combination, and then that will definitely bring on psychosis. But if he's been on his meds and then he's still drinking, the alcohol does lessen the effect of the medication. But if he still has a little bit in him, then it really all depends on, but yeah, definitely if he's not taking his meds and then starts to drink, hospital. Good question. Yeah, so anyway.
Being the radio guy, going over there with the traumatic, what he saw, is that what brought on his?
Yeah. She asked if he'd been over there and the radio operator. You guys, my son, he doesn't talk about it, but I mean, they lived in foxholes. I wish and I hope that one day he's going to be sitting right beside me and telling you guys his story, because just talking about it is therapeutic. But he was in foxholes, communicating with the sniper that was across the way, and but that's about all he tells me. But yeah, the trauma from that just changed the chemistry of his brain. Yeah. And from what I understand, when I went to that home program and I talked to a recruiter that came to the STC program in Medea, he said that he has quite a few friends that are coming back home from Iraq and Afghanistan and come back from war. He said, it sounds like you're talking about, he mentioned his friend's name. So, yeah, I hate war. But again, it could have happened. He could have got out of the military, got married, and then go through divorce, and then that could have been his trigger. Or either I passed, and that could have been his trigger. Good questions. Any other questions? There's a hush silence over around. Well, thank you all for your attention. And again, I've got some pamphlets up here and some of my contact information. I've also got some pamphlets about bipolar, schizophrenia, PTSD, and depression, and also some pamphlets up here about the programs that we have today. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a beautiful day.
Thank you.